I wanted to talk to you a little bit about going from being the owner of a business to now being an employee.
I never really thought that much about it. I never did a lot of assessment taking.
You're a gem of a human being.
Without the employees, I have nothing, right? I don't have a business. I don't have people to serve our clients.
You literally would give the shirt off your back to them if they needed it.
I know in my heart, people can't give 110% every day. You can't, right?
When you invest in your people, when you invest in your employees, they invest in your customers, they invest in your business.
If somebody doesn't want to be at our place, I'll help them find another job.
Welcome to Leadership Backstage, the podcast that exposes the raw truths behind leadership. We dive deep into blind spots, failures, and bold moves, questioning the myths leaders cling to and challenging you to think differently. Each episode brings unfiltered stories from CEOs, executives, and thought leaders who fought through scaling pains, culture clashes, and high-stakes decisions. This is where courage, clarity, and breakthrough thinking collide, sparking insights that actually matter. Here's your host, Claudia Williams.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Leadership Backstage, where we go behind the curtain to talk about blind spots and breakthroughs in leadership. Today, we're joined by someone who is coming from a military background. He was a Marine turned sales extraordinaire, turned business owner. At the end of the day, he'll tell you it's all about the people, because without people, there is no business. And those people are your employees, your customers, and all the people who come in and out on a daily basis. And he will tell you people see that he's selling a product, and that's not at all what's happening. He is selling an experience, whether you are an employee or a patient or a patient's family member. It's all about what we experience through the use of those products. We're going to talk about control, owning a business, selling a business, and everything in between. Welcome, Michael Bistline. Mike, thanks so much for joining me.
Claudia, thanks for having me and for that wonderful introduction. I hope I can live up to that. So
you're a gem of a human being. And I remember one of the first conversations we had, and the word empathy came up, and you described yourself as not very empathetic. And I've gotten to know you over several years now, and you have one of the biggest hearts of anyone I've met. So I'm really curious. First, tell everyone who you are and what you do.
Yeah, well, thank you. So good morning, Mike Bistline. I am the former co-partner of Phillips Workplace Interiors. And today I'm the vice president at Danker, and we are an interiors integrator. Born and raised in central Pennsylvania, as Claudia said, and spent 6 years in the Marine Corps, which I think shaped who I am today and how I engage with people, how I engage with life, how I look at life. And so I'm happy to share this, and I'm smiling inside on this empathetic conversation that you, Claudia, started, because I never really thought that much about it. I never did a lot of assessment taking, but my partner thought it would really be great before we go into business together to do assessments on each other and just see, are we really compatible, right? Are we a yin and yang? Are we compatible? Or, what are the differences? Just so we knew going in. And my assessment came back, I was really unempathetic, right? I was a 3. And I think it shocked all of us. And I think part of that is, it's maybe not that I'm unempathetic. It's just the way it showed up in the assessments that I do make decisions really fast. And I'm the first to remain humble and say, if I make a mistake, I'll be the first to tell you I made that mistake. But we pivot from it and we learn from it and we keep moving. And so I don't know if that had a direct correlation to low empathy, where depending on how the assessments were done, but I've now done probably half a dozen different assessments, and they're all pretty common that I have a low empathy. And Claudia, I would acknowledge what you said. I think people would agree with you that I do have a bigger heart than maybe what the assessments are saying. And so I call it the art and the science of the assessment, right? There's a science side and then there's an art side. And so how you show up to me is probably a little more important than the assessment, but that's where that running inside joke has come from that an assessment says I'm low. So we'll see.
Yeah, and it's a great cautionary reminder for everyone that an assessment is not the be all, do all, end all. It is a piece of data in a big picture when we're looking at people, because anyone who does know you, if they asked you any questions about how you treat people, it is to say you go out of your way to help people, and your employees, when they needed something, or they had a crisis in their lives or something came up, you literally would give the shirt off your back to them if they needed it. And it wasn't about how it impacted the business. You factored those things in, but you put the employee and their families first over and over and over again.
Claudia, I'm glad you brought it up, because you're right. While I'm really humble, I believe when things aren't good at home, or, they're not good with an employee, they're not good at the office. And so if we truly believe we hire the right people, right? We hire humble people, people that are hungry, people that are smart, and you do everything to protect the employee, right? Because without them, you started this podcast with the comment, without the employees, I have nothing, right? I don't have a business. I don't have people to serve our clients. And so when things go sideways, whether it's a death in the family, a death on the team, kids are sick, spousal needs some type of medical care, or parents, it's like we've got to go out of our way to do what we can to support the employee and their family, because at the end of the day, we want the employee back, right? We want them back as their whole self. And oftentimes, when these outside distractions come in, it distracts from the business. And so you're right. I will protect what I consider my largest asset next to my clients is my employees. And I'll do everything I can to protect them.
And this doesn't mean that you ever compromised on your expectations for performance. You have high expectations.
I do, right? And so I think, as you've worked with me in my career, we've talked a lot about this. I do have high expectations. And I think some of that, because I questioned some of my leadership styles back in the day, that I wonder if some of that discipline and expectations and accountability come from my Marine Corps days. But I expect people to give it their all, right? I expect people to show up, even though I know in my heart, people can't give 110% every day. You can't, right? And we'll talk about that later. How do we give back to make sure people are recharging and getting this opportunity for rejuvenation? But yeah, we give a lot, but we expect a lot. And it becomes a really harmonious relationship, quite frankly, that there's a lot of respect that goes both ways. When you can find that harmonious balance that I'm talking about between the give and the take, but the support and the nurturing and the caring and the relationships that we build with our employees, it's pretty special, quite frankly. It's pretty special. And it sort of warms your heart to watch them evolve, right? And them start working towards their aspirations and, what are their goals? And I'm also a realist to know, gosh, my employees aren't going to stay with me forever. Would I like them to? Sure. I would love them to, especially some of them that have become dear friends. But at the same time, as an owner of a company, I have an obligation to help them get to their aspirations as well. And sometimes that's not doing what I need them to do. It's how do I meet them at the intersection of their personal and their professional life. And if they say, hey, Mike, I'm going to give you 5 really good years, I'll take the 5 really good years, right? Mm-hmm. And help them on their next journey or their next step in their journey while they're here. And it's pretty special to watch that and watch people move on and succeed in what's next for them. Does it hurt the business? Sure. We've got to manage the risk there. But quite frankly, I find the risk so minimal when you have really good people that want to move on. But to me, it's more risky I shared with a different host of a podcast, probably a year ago now, that if somebody doesn't want to be at our place, I'll help them find another job, right? It's the last thing I want is somebody miserable coming to work, or somebody not enjoying what they're doing, or not enjoying spending time with the people that we spend so many of our waking hours with. I'll help them. Like, I will gladly. And I mean that from my heart. And it's taken things like COVID and the downsizing of the company and some other people moving on to really come back to me and say, like, you were genuine when you said you would help me. And I'm like, absolutely. That's our role as leaders. That's our role as business owners, where, we have a company to protect for the employees that are staying and the employees that want the long-term longevity of a employment or a career. But at the same time, I want to help the people on their journey, because what their success might not be the same as my success. Right. And so how do I meet them where they are and help them do really meaningful work that is beneficial to our organization and our clients and their peers, at the same time enabling them to explore what might be next on the horizon. And so that to me is meaningful, and I find a lot of enjoyment in it. It's sad when I see those people go, but gosh, as you see them flourish, it's pretty rewarding. So it's pretty
Everything
rewarding.
you're describing is when you invest in your people, when you invest in your employees, they invest in your customers, they invest in your business, and they in turn investing in you. Because when you care about them, they care about you, they care about your customers.
I'm sure we'll get there, Claudia, but it's, with the sale of the company, it was really important for me to find a culture similar, right?
Yeah.
And so, not that I'll go through all those core values, but one of the core values is, if our employees love our company, right, the customers will love the company as well, because that shines right through the employees to the customer. And so I think we've always, even way before I ever thought about what did my succession or exit look like, that was important to us, right? It's important to know how the employees are reflecting our organization to our customers, right? And if you're going to be a client-centric organization, it has to shine through. But I'm also a human, knowing that human beings make mistakes. Human beings have bad days, but how do we recognize that, and how do we hold that accountability, but also their peers to hold them accountable, that, hey, when you're having a bad day, it's okay for somebody to say something, right? And maybe that day you're not talking to the customers, right? You're doing some other work, or you're doing something else, or you just need the general reminder of, hey, these are the people we're serving. And because we don't know what's going on at home, right? We don't know what happened on the way to work, or what happened last night at the Little League football game. We're going to take people at their best. We're going to take people that we believe are showing up every day with the best intentions to serve, but also recognize people are human beings, and sometimes we got to meet them where they are. But it doesn't mean that they're any less worthy if we have to tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, time out. Right? I need you to step away for a while.
You can't expect them to just leave it at the door, or to shake off personal stuff. We are one person. And look, there are some people who are very good at compartmentalizing stuff, but most people aren't.
Yes. Yeah. And so it's what I love them to, when they step over the threshold, to be the jovial person that we know they are capable of being. It's just not reality. If I can get 80 to 90% when they step across that threshold, that's who we hired. I'll take it every day, and we'll work on the other 10 to 20% and support.
And sometimes
them, right?
if we do acknowledge it and say, hey, you don't seem like yourself, what's going on? If we do just give them 5 or 10 minutes to talk and have a space, they're able to get past the emotion in the moment and get refocused. So knowing that we have a good peer or a great leader who can get that out of us can help us get past it and get back and refocused for the day.
Yeah. Spot on.
You've made quite a few big changes in your career, from Marine Corps to leading a sales team to getting married to a business partner, because as you described it, when you sat down with your partner and you're talking about, are we going to be good partners? I mean, that's a business marriage, to selling your business. Walk us through a little bit of each of these choices and what you thought about. What was the decision-making process like for you?
Yeah. So it's been quite the journey, and I really need to go back to, my youth. I grew up here in Central PA, blue collar family, not a lot of college education in the family. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Right. So I was an Eagle Scout. And so I was always a high achiever, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I selected the Marine Corps, and in either faith or hard knocks, whatever you want to call it, I ended up in the air wing of the Marine Corps, which most people don't even know the Marine Corps has an air wing. And our job is to support the infantry in the Marines. And the Marine Corps tends to be the the boots on the ground first in a combat campaign. And so I ended up in a squadron of fighter aircraft where I was surrounded by 44 Marine officers, all highly educated, very, very growth oriented, to fly at the time what was the most sophisticated fighter aircraft in the world. And they all started looking at me going, what are you doing here? Why are you in the Marine Corps? And so a lot of them took me under their wing, so to speak, and sat me down and said, no pun intended, you need to get your ass back to college and get an education. And so about halfway through my Marine Corps career, I enrolled back in college. And at that time, we were in what was really the Cold War, the peace war, right? It was peace times between a lot of conflicts. And so I was making great progress through the Marine Corps, getting my education with a great boss that would allow me to take work half days and go to school half days. And then towards the end of my 6 years in the Corps, in multiple deployments around the world with Westpacs and so forth, Saddam Hussein decided to invade Kuwait. And where we were located in the world, without getting into details, was a worldwide military communication system that we knew this was coming as early as May. And he didn't actually invade till, that August of that year, of August of 90. But I was also enrolling in college for the fall semester of August of 90. And I looked at my boss and said, hey, I know we're on 24-hour operations right now. Any concern? He's like, you're fine. Go get enrolled in school. And so I enrolled in school, and it was Labor Day weekend. I remember the day like it was yesterday. There was a knock on my door of my apartment, and they said, hey, the master sergeant wants to see you. And I go in, and he said, I really screwed up. I know I told you to enroll in school, but I need you to leave tomorrow.
Wow.
And I said, where am I going? And he said, you're going to the Gulf War. And I said, the whole office is going. He goes, no, just two of you. And so I was in an office of 44 people. And he said the major general at the time wanted one other guy and myself to support him in setting up that operation. And so I went to Bahrain. And
what were you thinking when he told you that?
I don't know, Claudia, if you can process it fast enough, right? And, you're trying to unload because you literally have to move out of the apartment. So you're trying to get everything out of the apartment. You're trying to get your car into storage. So all these things are happening so fast. And oh, by the way, you need to be with like a little air terminal on base. You need to be at the air terminal the next day. And as you roll up to the air terminal and go walking in, the armory's there, handing out your rifles and your ammunition and cases of food and water. And they said, try to ration it because you don't know when you're going to get it again. And so it's a long flight from Southern California to what at the time was Saudi Arabia, with a couple stops in between for fuel. And so you're processing, like the whole time you're processing, trying to think through the scenarios. But this is really the first time the United States was now going back into a conflict other than some really minor skirmishes around the world. And so that set this path of, I wanted to go back to school. I wanted to get educated. I saw a bunch of people having a lot of trust in me to put me in the situation I was in to really stand up the 3rd Marine Aircraft Wing for what was at the time Storm Desert Shield. And so when I got back, I had enough vacation built up, or leave as we call it in the military. When I came home in April, I never went back. I went back, got my stuff and came home, and my exit was the end of June that year of 91. And then went and enrolled full-time in college, finished college, and then looked for, what was my path. And I grew up in a construction family. So I was comfortable working in the environment of building and construction and the trades. And so I worked as a superintendent for a while, did some estimating for a while, and landed in what was today this contract interiors world. And was blessed in the late 90s to land at a company out of Grand Rapids, Michigan that teetered on the edge of Fortune 500, not quite Fortune 500, but an amazing CEO that believed wholeheartedly in design thinking and the way we help customers see space as a resource, not overhead. When you think of people and real estate, your two biggest expenses, how did we view space as a strategic asset? And so it started changing my thinking. And then probably 12 years into that career at Steelcase, I became the sales manager of an entrepreneurial brand that, while residing in Central PA, I was weekly commuting to Boston to work with the entrepreneurial ecosystem up there. And it really made me feel small in the sense that I'm watching people up there try to solve true world problems, like things that to this day, I'm still really struggling to understand how they do some of the things they do.
You were exposed to a lot of big thinkers and big thinking in Boston.
Yeah, no doubt, right? You start, and I know you're familiar with this, but you start watching TED Talks and the amount of resources they were putting into TED Talks because there was so much happening in the Boston entrepreneur ecosystem. Everything from, breakthroughs with cancer treatments to a lot of community led social movements to the first face transplant, like literally pull a face off of a human being and put a new face on a human being. Right. Mm-hmm. And so you start watching this and the passion behind it and how these people got up to go to work every day. It's almost hard to not let it impact you. Right. And so
you sound inspired.
Yeah. But Claudia,
even now, as you're talking about it, Mike, you can see, for everyone watching video, you can see your face is lighting up.
I was the furniture guy. Yes. Did I believe in creating space? I really did. Right. Mm-hmm. But every day walking down the sidewalk, I kept saying to myself, I can do more. Right. I can do more. I can. And if you would ask my wife, if my wife was on the podcast, in that short 3 to 5 years that I was up there, she's like, yes, you resided in central Pennsylvania, but your entire life was Boston. You had way more friends and colleagues and associates, and like that was your life. And you're right. Like there's you still see the enthusiasm in me today, and I'm still friends with some of those people up there. Right, we share ideas, and I watched in hindsight, I watched the whole Bitcoin movement right up there, and maybe just that much, but you get this bug. Right. And all of a sudden, so I'm going to step back to where I picked up this notion of meeting the employees where they are. Right. I remember walking down the street with my boss in Boston. Actually, we're in Cambridge. And he said, Mike, you can be an entrepreneur in a really large company. Right. And he said, you got all the resources, and he goes, but it'll never be yours. And he said, or you can make the choice to be an entrepreneur and exit the company. And so I had that choice to make. And so as this tension, and not a hard tension, but it's amazing when you have leadership that sees your passions and again, wants to meet you where you are and lays it out on the table that it's okay. If your choice is to leave, I'm behind you 100%. Right. And he's still behind me. He's still in my corner. And so a couple things happened, and this opportunity in central Pennsylvania for what was a distributor of the manufacturer I worked for, they were looking for an exit strategy. And my partner reached out and said, hey, you travel this entire country, like coast to coast, San Francisco to Boston. Do you know anybody willing to move to central Pennsylvania to be my partner? And I said, maybe I'd like to throw my name in the hat. And so that's how it happened. In hindsight, gosh, it was a great 8-year run. Do I wish I would have done it sooner? Sure. But I can't. You can never go back and change what was the past. You can only change moving forward. And so it was a great 8-year run. My partner was looking for her exit. And so I started evaluating what does it mean to still do the work I do that's meaningful and purposeful and fills my cup, and where can I go still do that? And so gave up a little bit of the entrepreneurial side for some bigger thinking, but it's been a tremendous 40-year ride from going to the Marine Corps to where I'm sitting today. It's hard to believe it's been 40 years. Time flies.
The 8-year run, you did something extraordinary with your business in your industry. So, people from the outside looking in would say, you sell furniture. You put stuff in a room of some kind or in a building. And that's not what you do.
No.
That might be what someone looking in a window sees, but that's not what you do. And you did something extraordinary from a return on your investment in this business. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was important to me to commit and understand it. As I'm coming back from Boston in this entrepreneurial world that I lived in, and to see the returns and how hard people work. And so there's this scale there, right? And there's the scale of you got a financial return, but then you also have this filling my cup, right? Meaningful work. And you're right, Claudia, the company that I acquired was very much, they sold furniture, right? It's what they did. And there's some other business units, right? Which, not getting into that, they sold furniture. But where I came from, and this from, being associated with me in a Vistage group, I told everybody, I don't know why people buy this stuff. Why do we buy furniture? Because there's no value in it, right? The minute you think it's bad investment buying a car when you drive it off the lot, buying furniture, there's no value in the furniture, right? And so I didn't want to be a furniture dealer or store or contractor. What I wanted to be was really a consultant to help people understand how do we create space that allows people to co-locate or co-mingle or co-work to create really big, awesome ideas to create or to solve problems, right? Or to generate growth or to inspire the next idea. And so I always visioned it that way and wanted to evolve the business into more of a holistic interiors integrator where we control everything in the space, right? Because if it doesn't harmoniously work together, and we talk about technology that first use must inspire future use. So many of us get on technology, and if it doesn't work the first time, we're so frustrated. Like, are you really going to do it in front of your peers and or a colleague or a customer if you have any doubt it's going to work, right? And so we have this belief that first use must inspire future use. And so how do we become the holistic integrator of space? But Claudia, I think if you look at when I bought it, and then within 18 months or 24 months, whatever that date was, COVID happens. You're sort of scratching yourself going, what's going to happen, right? The government shut us down. We were blessed really early in the acquisition that within 24 months of the acquisition, we had already pivoted our business to be predominantly healthcare. In my background and coming up through various leaders, one of my leaders had me read the book by Roger Martin, Where to Play, How to Win. And so we made choices, right? This is way before COVID, right? Acquired the business. What are the resources we had? We only had 19 employees. What are the resources we had? And what is the best and biggest and brightest market opportunity in South Central Pennsylvania? And when you started looking at the data, so this is the art and science, when you started looking at the data, there's 7 healthcare systems that serve South Central Pennsylvania.
And they were with plans then to continue to grow. Massive expansion plans, fighting for this space.
Fighting for market share, right?
Yep.
Fighting for patients, fighting for caregivers. And so it's almost unheard of, because I traveled nationally. I'm not going to say there's not other markets that have it, but to have 7 healthcare systems serving really a smaller tertiary market, it's almost unprecedented. The residents of South Central Pennsylvania are sort of blessed that you got choice. But at the same time, we saw a huge market opportunity and really pivoted, say, how much more can we do for these healthcare organizations, from not only furniture and setting up spaces that inspire healing, right? Because at the same time, healthcare for a patient and or family can be extremely stressful, right? And so how do we create spaces that are inviting, are warm, that bring this relaxation to the families that are going through a stressful time, simultaneously supporting the caregivers, because we all know the healthcare industry, they're overworked, right? They're understaffed. Yeah. And so it's this balance of you're trying to support the patient, you're trying to support the family member who is supporting the patient, you're trying to support the caregiver. And then on top of that, you have this huge umbrella called the health system that at the end of the day, they still have to remain profitable, right, to provide healthcare. And so we found it a challenge, but at the same time, we found we could add value. There's things we could take off their plate and do for them, from facilities management to light construction to renovation to repairs to warranty, a whole host of things that said, you focus on delivering healthcare. I'll focus on keeping your spaces up and running. And we started seeing this growth, and then COVID happens. And while we didn't know, you try to scenario plan, you try to think through everything. And in hindsight, I'm one to admit my mistakes. I cut staff too much, right? I shared that with folks because we didn't know, the government shut us down, couldn't have people in the office. We were back open, I think 36 hours after the government shut us down because of the amount of healthcare work we were doing. Right. However, I didn't need all the staff, right? Because we couldn't come into the building. And so we ran for about 4 months, leaving people furloughed, and came to the realization that it's not fair to them to keep them in this unknown status of, will it ever come back? Because we didn't know. And to prevent them from going out and shopping for another opportunity. In hindsight, I wish I would have kept some of them a little longer, but you live and learn, right? And again, the employees were calling us saying, I don't want to go somewhere else. Like, I don't want to go work for a competitor. And we're like, you got to do what's right for you and your family. Like, we will support you, right? This gets back to supporting our people. And so, things have a funny way of coming full circle, but it's But we grew. And so COVID happens, we double down on healthcare. And so, in the matter of 5 years, from acquisition to 5 years, we essentially doubled the business, revenue, a little
And
over doubled the employees.
your profit margin is way above industry norm.
Yeah. And so I was going to go there. So because there's a saying in business, that revenues for vanity and profits are for sanity. I joke that I sure don't need to practice. It's not to say we're perfect and we make our share of mistakes, but we don't need to practice. And so while we doubled the business, we quadrupled the profits of the company and looked through some efficiencies and still realized we had space to improve. People were constantly talking to us about finding 0.25%. Right? Or 0.1% or 0.5%, because it adds up, right? The bigger the business comes, those percentage points add up. And so, we started examining almost every department in the business and challenging our staff to. And when we went through the profit sharing model, it was in their best interest to help us find waste in the waste stream, right? Or the work stream. And that's where you got to empower the people. Like you got to help them understand. And this is sort of becoming my life mission right now, is helping them understand. I hired a really smart person, right? I hired somebody that was humble. I hired somebody that was hungry, like all these things. So if they line up with the values of what we think a good employee is, empower them, give them the guardrails and stay out of the way. Right. And so I think the way I talk about it with our team was, I gave them a 4-lane highway. I mean, call it an 8-lane. It doesn't matter to me, but a 4-lane highway is good enough for the analogy. I asked them, I said, the 4-lane highway is yours. You don't need to come to me to run on that highway. If you need to run in this lane today, run in this lane. If you want to be in the fast lane today, be in the fast lane. At the end of the day, the 4-lane highway and how we serve clients was all defined. But if you're going to get off an exit ramp, let's talk about that, right? And then at the same time, try not to hit the guardrails on both sides, because when you hit the guardrails, that's margin erosion. That's where the errors occur. And so they had a ton of autonomy to work how they wanted, when they wanted. And here's the important piece after COVID, where they wanted, right? I knew this from Boston because I was a road warrior. I was living in a backpack. Every week, I packed my backpack with my technology, my iPad, my computer, my clothes, and got on a train or a car to Boston and lived out of a backpack. And the amount of people that were working in coffee shops, and Boston's known for Dunkin' Donuts. You can see 3 of them going down Tremont Street. Yep. Like it's between the Dunkin' Donuts and the bars and the cafes and the Boston Commons when the weather's nice. You don't have to be in an office to work, which gets back to.
Which is ironic.
Right. Why do I sell furniture? Right.
Right.
And when COVID happened, I looked at the employees and said, guys, you don't have to come here to work. I'd love you to come here to stay connected. I would love you to come here to be inspired and to work on projects together. But if it is heads down work, right? And so we started looking at space different. Back to that, it still had to be a strategic asset, but all of a sudden, I didn't need a bunch of just heads down cubicles for people to work in. What I needed was spaces that people that just worked at home for the last year to 18 months because of COVID, in that warmth, in that hospitality, in that feeling that it was a little more like home than, gosh, I'm in an office with a bunch of Trafford lights and, big windows and bright light. Like we started recreating space to mimic what people find comfort in. Right. And maybe they want to work on the couch for a couple hours with their feet propped up. Okay. Right. And so how do we intentionally create these spaces? And I use this word of, we got to earn the commute now. We as business owners have a responsibility to earn the commute. And listen, there's going to be some people that watch us and go, no, I mean, hell, I gave them a job. They need to get to work, right? I don't see it that way. We've got 44 employees and what I believe is some of the best and the brightest. And if they need to work at home because Johnny has a football game or a soccer game at 2:00 in the afternoon on Tuesday, I expect you to be at Johnny's football game or soccer game, right? Get the rest of the work done later that night or work a couple extra hours the next day. I'm meeting the employees where they are with the understanding and the expectation that we're serving our clients.
You are describing a huge amount of trust in people. What I've seen is 1 or 2 people erode that trust, and it causes the leader to punish everyone because 1 or 2 people abuse the trust, right? They don't live up to the expectations. They don't perform well when given 4 lanes on a highway in which to perform.
And so then I would question the leader, right? Are we
Thank you.
are we giving the employees the right metrics, right? Clear metrics, right? And a clear understanding of what the expectations are, and then holding them accountable. And oftentimes what we see is sometimes we tend to promote people into team leadership or middle management that because they excelled at their role, but then we never invested in the leadership of the people, right? And so, Claudia, it's why I was part of Vistage for as long as I was, right? It's why I'm still part of the things that we do. It's if we stop learning, right, we're sort of done. And so it's the same thing whether we promote people. So while we hold the employees accountable, we need to hold the middle managers accountable, and we need to invest in the same in both of them. And so to me, it's always been about trust. It's if you're not going to trust the employees, then you're in the wrong business or the wrong role.
And
right.
For the listeners, Vistage is one of many different types of organizations of peer groups. And you took a chance on me years ago. I was the chair of your peer advisory group. We had different CEOs of different presidents, CEOs, owners, founders of many different types of businesses. And that's where you all were able to sit in the room and talk about your issues and opportunities in a confidential setting. And that's
I think this was instilled early in me. If I go all the way back, if I reflect on it right back to that early Marine Corps day, 20-year-old Mike, I had mentors there. I think everybody should have a mentor, right? And so while we have mentors and we have work buddies, mentorship can be up and down the organization, right? There's oftentimes I will lean on a really young employee to see how are they responding to the messaging that I'm putting out, right? Because now that and it's not uncommon. I mean, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, we had 4 generations in the workplace. Today, some people are saying we got maybe 4, even 5 generations. And so not everybody responds the same to the same messaging, based off of just a whole host of things. And so when I talk about mentorship should be up and down the organization, just like managing should be up and down the organization. And so I rely on the youth sometimes because they're the future of the company. I mean, do I love my generation in the company? Because there's a lot of knowledge and a lot of wisdom and a lot of experience, but there's also a lot of bad habits, right? There's a lot of, well, this is the way we've always done it, right? And so I want people to challenge. I want people to have a voice, right? Doesn't mean you're always going to get the vote, but I want them to have the voice and know that their voice matters and they're going to be heard. Because that's where you start to build the trust, right? In that relationship of when you say I have an open door policy and you really mean it. I shared this with somebody recently, Claudia, that, oftentimes leaders are so busy that they say it's an open door policy and they say, sure, come in and share, but we're really not listening to understand.
Say more.
We're listening. We're listening, but we have a predetermined notion of, hey, I'm going to let them get it off their chest. I'm going to listen. And then out the door they go and nothing's going to change. Versus, are we listening to truly understand? Because there's a lot of good ideas that this younger generations bring in from not only technology, but work processes and how we do things and the amount of things they can handle that maybe we didn't think they could because of the way, processes were originally set up. So I love this understanding of if you're truly going to have the open door, listen to understand, right? Before responding or before setting, what was the decision made. The other thing I would say, and I just used this one this week because this was new to me and I wish I would have brought one with me, but you can have 2 processes and they can both be right.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? And so as we talk through this week, the gentleman says to me, he goes, Mike, pull a coin out of your pocket. I pulled, a quarter out of my pocket. He goes, there's the heads and the tails, right? And both sides are right because it's still worth 25 cents. And so this notion of, are we truly listening to understand? Because one way is not always the right way, right? There could be multiple ways to get to a solution. And so I think there are the challenges at the speed in which businesses are moving today, the demands of the customers, what customers are asking for and the expectations. It's like, we've got to be willing to listen and have open, transparent, honest conversations. And I think we're still missing that a little bit in business, that it's the way we've always done it. So let's upset the apple cart. So
listen, Mike, I tell leaders all the time that there is a reason we hire people. There's a reason you acquired this particular business. And if the only thing you're doing is trying to assimilate them into your way of doing something, you're completely missing the potential. You're missing the opportunity. If you're not going to listen to what perspectives they bring or be curious about what made them so successful in the first place, you're missing all the opportunity for what made them successful where they were, or how they did what they did, or what new knowledge or ideas they have to bring to take you from the level of success where you are to the potential for where you can go.
Sure. There's so much opportunity out there. There's so much opportunity, but we've got to be open to, again, back to hiring that type of individual, giving them an open lane highway to operate, right? I think too often business leaders, Claudia, so if we talk about that 4-lane highway, I think too often business leaders, you talk about this as simulation, or this notion of, hey, this is the way we do it.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like the cars that are being built today with lane assist, right? And if you turn lane assist on and you accidentally look away for a second and the steering wheel's jerking you, right, into the lane, like, it drives you nuts, right? Most people turn it off because, like, we're just not built to operate that way. Why would we expect our employees to operate that way or be motivated to be managed that way? And so I want them to have the 4-lane highway. I want them to be empowered, because when I empower them with the expectation of what we're delivering to their clients, they deliver an exceptional experience. They really do. And the clients know it. And Claudia, this goes back to when you asked, what was I building? I'm building a service model, right? I'm building almost a consultancy of service, of risk mitigation for our clients. Like, I am mitigating your risk. If you choose me or you choose our organization, I'm mitigating your risk is what I'm doing. And sometimes we'll guarantee that in rebates. If we didn't mitigate the risk and deliver on our promise to you, we'll rebate it back. Business is too hard. And when you talk about the healthcare environment specifically, because it's where we shine, they have so much going on and so much to manage, that when you can trusted consultant or a trusted partner that can mitigate all your risk as it relates to what we do with space, we're finding they don't hesitate to double down and bet on us.
And little did we know that you and I would both be beneficiaries of your work, having had stays in one of the in-hospital rooms you helped design. And I remember texting you. My husband was in a hospital in a room that you beautifully fulfilled. And I was saying, oh my gosh, the really kind nurse is unfolding the sofa futon for me. I'm not sleeping in a chair. And it was incredible.
Gosh, I almost forgot about those days, because I stayed there twice, which is just crazy. When you build a new hospital, you don't plan on using it, but to unforeseen circumstances. But just the joy you were talking about with Boston during my stay, and it was more for just some antibiotics to work their magic with an infection. I certainly wasn't bedridden. And so I found great joy in the nurses and I walking the halls, talking about all the different spaces and why are the spaces designed the way they were, and to see their faces and their reactions, because now I'm struggling to believe I'm at this end of Generation X, right? I'm not quite a cusper with the boomers, but I'm right on the bottom edge. But the generation of nurses coming up in is this generation I'm talking about, right? Like, we've got to empower them and inspire them to want to do this meaningful work when it's really hard. It's extremely stressful. There's long days. And so to walk them through the space and for them to understand the why and see the joy in their face, that this is their facility, this is a place that they get to work, man, that's meaningful. Like, it's really inspiring to have those rewarding interactions with the people that get to use it. Like, it's awesome. Yeah.
That's amazing. I want to talk to you a little bit about going from being the owner of a business to now being an employee, and what control means. And I'd love for you to talk about being in the basket of a balloon ride.
Yeah. So, when my partner confided in me that, hey, getting close to the end of the ride of what she wanted out of it, right? Because the whole thing happened pretty quickly. The acquisition, when the old owners were looking for their succession, and there wasn't a lot of planning that took place. It really happened rapidly. And so when my partner approached me and said, it's about time for me to get off. I got some things in life that I still want to do. I've got some elderly parents that need some help. And so we started this dialogue about, what would this transition look like for us? We evaluated a couple different options, everything from ESOP to acquisition and probably everything in between. And so landed on an acquisition that there was some common previous work colleagues that owned. And so I felt there's a similar culture, but what happened, we were going into a much bigger organization, right? And so I was certainly giving up control of what we built, right? And putting it into the hands of a much bigger organization, an organization 10 times the size of us. So to give you a perspective, we were 40 employees at the acquisition, and we were going into a company just under 400 employees. And so that's hard, right? It's hard. And I think, Claudia, some of the words that you've used or the language you used around, the voice, the simulation, the observation and the how and the why. How did we get to 5 times the industry average in profitability? Right? I mean, we quadrupled our profits, but we're 5 times the industry average. And what we found, and there's this notion of when you get to a really big company, not that 400 is that big, but it's pretty big.
Yeah.
The processes are so aligned through the organization where there's not a lot of, the 4-lane highway rapidly comes down to probably a 2-lane highway, right? And there's not a lot of room for movement, yet you lose your agility and your nimbleness.
Right. As an organization scales, it tends to have more formal systems and processes. That nimbleness, that ability to say, just go do stuff, it becomes harder to do that.
It really does, right? And the best intentions are there.
Sure.
But at the same time, we see the pace slow down, right? And it's slowing
down. A lot of system and process approvals.
Yes, right. And so, but I will give the CEO credit where, he's recognizing we've grown so fast, right? Mm-hmm. This organization that acquired us has tripled their volume in the last 10 years. And so when you get to that scale, it's a lot, right? And he's big right now with his leadership team. He had us all together recently of going, we need to keep inspiring our people, not legislating to them, right? He's like, I want to get the legislation out of the business, right? And I want to inspire, because when you inspire people back to the way we were doing it, great things happen, right? And you can still have process. You can still have process.
And expectations.
But there's got to be some autonomy in there to say and to challenge, because the answer to every problem is in headcount, right? And so as the organization grows, it's really quick to say, we just need more people. We need more people. We need more people. And what we're seeing and what we're asking and the voice we want to come with is the process might have worked here, right? But when we doubled and then doubled again, the process might not be the right process anymore. And you've got to be willing to ask yourself those hard questions, right? And so, and it doesn't mean that the value in what somebody created was wrong. It was right for the time, but it might not be right for where we are today and where we're going, right? And so you constantly got to be okay and that humble enough to know that it's not personal. Like, this is not an attack on somebody's person or who they are and their thinking. We've got to be challenging the business,
right,
to make sure that it is still the best version of itself, to be a client-centric organization and serve them, at the same time inspiring our people, not legislating to them, right? Mm-hmm. And so we're working really hard on it. And it's, when you come from a really small entrepreneurial, nimble system, it's hard, right? I'll be the first to tell you. And I've always encouraged everybody to be honest and transparent. And so, we just had all the vice presidents together 2 weeks ago for a big off-site as we're working on some things for next year. And I shared from my heart where I am, right? Like, they need to know where Mike is now walking across that threshold, right? And what I'm struggling with and how I'm feeling. And it's about me, but it's them understanding how am I showing up right now and the support that I need from them to help me get to that next level. And so I encourage people to have the humbleness, right? And the transparency, because that's the only way you move forward. And a little sidebar, Claudia, so to answer your question about a hot air balloon ride I just took.
Yeah.
I'm a control freak. There's no doubt, right? I'm an entrepreneur and I want to control in light of empowering my team. But, we set the processes. We gave him clear expectations. There's the road. Go get it done.
And I love how you described guardrails too. Like, yes, you have all this room to move, and here are the boundaries.
Correct.
So that's a perfect description. So
yeah. And so we get in this hot air balloon, and you realize really, really quick, and I have a common experience with you, that I've flown a lot, right? Every Monday and Friday in my previous Fortune 500 career, every Monday, Friday, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of flights, probably thousands. It wasn't comfortable for me, but I did it because I didn't have control. Like, I had no control, but at the same time, go to the data. It doesn't matter how much that plane bounces around. The pilot's going to land the thing, right? And unfortunately, there's a tragedy recently.
I'm glad you think that, but for everyone listening, I hate flying. I hate it. I'm nervous the whole time. Okay.
But those planes were made for this, right? The planes were made that it is truly the safest form of transportation. And so anyway, I don't like not being in control. And so when you get in this basket, right, with a pilot, that as I'm standing next to probably a 50-pound, what looked like propane cylinder, blowing gas up into a balloon.
I want to vomit just listening to this.
And he's just pulling a lever, and the next thing you know, like, it's in the balloon, they let go of the ropes, and you are climbing fast.
Soaring. And it looks beautiful. The pictures are gorgeous. It
was amazing, and it's so calm. There is no turbulence, right? But he probably did make me real comfortable where he goes, we just go where the wind blows us. Wherever it goes, we go. In hindsight, experiencing that 90-minute ride, I think he had way more control than he told us, because he's radioing to the ground, Claudia, of going, hey, let's go to farm XYZ up the road 3 miles, and we'll think about landing there. Now, if the winds weren't working with him, right, he might not land there, but there are rudimentary controls in hot air ballooning, right? So up and down, trying to find the wind, communicating with other balloons of going, hey, how are you moving versus how are we moving, to spitting over the side of the basket. Like, he would lean over and just spit and watch the spit fall. And depending on how the spit moved, he would do something with the balloon. And so
no.
But at the end of the day, I think the second time I'd probably enjoy it more than the first time, because the first time you're worried, right? Like, you're looking around, you're trying to enjoy this beautiful setting, and all you see is power lines everywhere. And you hear the horror stories of balloons hitting power lines, right? And he's navigating, and, we're going up and down, and the next thing I know, he puts us in a farm field where he said he was going to put us. And we went by it, and we came back to it. And so that tells me he had more control of the balloon than he let on. He grew up in a family of ballooners. For 40 years, he's been flying balloons.
Wow.
Since a little kid.
Wow.
But as somebody that likes control, you're letting go. You are letting go and trusting somebody else.
What I love about how you describe that is that, saying the second time, I'll enjoy it more than the first time. And that can be said for anything and everything. When we're pushed outside of our comfort zone, and that's how we learn, that's how we grow. And for everyone who's kind of stuck, the second time will be easier than the first time, and the third and the fourth and all that. And so you're never going to get me in a hot air balloon, but I'll try. Stop. Sorry. That's just never going to happen for me. But I can try a lot of different stuff.
Yeah, but I think you're right, Claudia. Sometimes you've got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because it's where the growth happens, right? It's where true growth can happen, or where advancement can take place. But it doesn't mean we don't plan for it, right? Like, I'm a planner, right? Not to the degree of some of our colleagues, but I'm a planner. And I love sharing this story with some folks of, well, I thought I was a planner in the COVID and some of the work we did through Backstage with COVID in scenario planning. When I watched the movie Free Solo, right? And you talk about planning and control of when Alex Honnold climbed that rock face. And the first time I watched it, just how sweaty my palms were. Right. And I think I probably watched it during COVID, how sweaty my palms are. Even talking about it right now, my palms are getting sweaty. But I made my sales team watch it, because the amount of planning that young man does, right? In spite of there's some things that he's wired differently, but the amount of purposeful planning that he did, he really almost guaranteed his outcome.
Yes. So first I had to Google to make sure that he survives the climb. El Capitan, it's the El Capitan climb. And then even knowing the outcome and watching that, the nervousness throughout that whole movie. But yes, I was struck by how meticulous and detailed and purposeful everything about his approach to it was clear for the amount of risk in everything he does everything to eliminate risk.
Yes.
It's wild.
And Claudia, we could say that about so many things, but oftentimes in business, we're disappointed when we don't win an opportunity, or a client chooses somebody else, or an employee decides to move on. Like, there's so many things we could look at and go, how purposeful were we in their development? How purposeful were we in planning our, like, I think of your beautiful daughter, right? A theater major, they perform over and over and over and over, practice to have a couple amazing shows, right? It's the same thing in business, right? Like we get so discouraged when we don't win something, but if we don't self-examine, what did we do? And that's why I had a sales team watch it. And I could certainly have operations watch as well, but the planning that goes into this, there's a saying out there and I can't think of the right words of it, but the amount of effort you put into something equals what you get out of it. And so I encourage people to, whether it's employee development, whether it's sales, whether it's operations, all those things, if we're not investing in all of it and helping grow, right? Literally lift, all boats rise on the tide, we can't be shocked by the disappointing outcomes.
Yeah.
And so, you started this chat or this talk with, it's all about the people, all about them, because without them, the machine doesn't go round.
Well, Mike, I'm really grateful that you're one of my people, that you're someone in my very close circle. And, from acquaintance to client to friend, I'm really grateful to call you friend. Thank you so much for joining me today and letting me go behind the curtain with you.
I appreciate the time. I appreciate just what we have. Like, I mean, you hit the nail on the head from the introduction to where we are today. It has been, I wish we could have met 10 years earlier, but here we are. I cherish it. I really do. So I appreciate you having me.
Me too. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So
have a great Thanksgiving holiday.
Thank you. You too.
Yeah.
This is another episode of Leadership Backstage. Until the next one, thanks for joining us.
The Leadership Backstage podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and see you on the next episode.